You're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source. And the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro.
Okay, what's good, everyone? It's Nigel here, Trinidad Empowerment Network. So I don't think I need to keep talking about this subject. I'm going to deliver it to you one more time until I see some substantive information coming from Caracas, Maduro, or Washington, Trump, or Rubio. There is no point talking about this anymore. Everything we hear appears to be noise and speculation. He said, she said nonsense. And I'm not into that. So today, we're going to talk about the OFAC license, Kamla, Stuart Young, Delcy Rodriguez, all these things that have been spoken about in Trinidad. I'm going to lay it out to you, the facts, the truth. All of this is just noise. Everything you hear on social media is just noise. The truth is, this Dragon's Gas deal is not about Trinidad and Tobago at all. It's not. It's about the US. It's about Venezuela, and it's about their relationship. It's about the sanctions placed on Venezuela by the United States and the global fight over who controls natural resources in Venezuela. So let's set the record straight. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Before we do so, before I unpack all of this, I want you to like and subscribe. I want you to like and subscribe to Trinidad Empowerment Network. We are almost 13,000 subs strong, but the bigger we are, the better we are, and the more we are able to hold the people in power to account in Trinidad and Tobago. So, a little bit of history here. A little bit of history. The United States, for those of you who know your history, the United States and Venezuela weren't always enemies. They were not always enemies. They were very close at one point. They were friendly. They liked each other. They very much enjoyed each other's company. For decades, Venezuela was one of America's biggest energy partners. Biggest energy partners. US oil giants like ExxonMobil, who are about to operate in Trinidad very soon, and Chevron, they all pump millions of barrels a day. And Washington got that cheap. They got a cheap and steady oil supply from Venezuela. Back then, they were bosom buddies. They were close. They were brethrens. It didn't matter who was in charge in Caracas. As long as American companies had access, the United States was happy. The United States was happy. Venezuela had the resources, they still do, and America had the refineries. They had the refineries, remember that. They also had the money, of course, and both sides got extremely rich from the natural resources found in Venezuela. What change? You are probably asking yourself. What change? This one, when I point it out to you, if you do not know, it's kind of obvious. It will be very apparent and obvious to you what changed, because something changed. As you know, they are now sworn enemy. Donald Trump hates Maduro. So, for those of you old enough to remember the name Hugo Chavez, here he is. And of course, you know about Maduro. What changed under Hugo Chavez and later Maduro? What changed to the Americans? Well, they decided that Venezuelan natural resources belongs to Venezuela. They nationalized Venezuela's oil industry. They pushed out Exxon and other US companies, by the way, and they declared, how dare they? How dare they, you say? They declared, they had the audacity to declare Venezuela's resources belongs to Venezuela, not foreign corporations. Their natural resources belongs to them. And America thought, well, how dare you? How dare you? Who do you think you are? That's when the relationship collapsed. That is when the relationship collapsed. Washington went from ally to enemy. sworn enemy. Sanctions followed. Sanctions followed, as America do. First, targeted sanctions, then full economic restrictions. Venezuela was cut off from global finance. Its economy collapsed almost overnight. Hyperinflation exploded, and millions of Venezuelans fled the country. Now, when you hear people in Trinidad crying about Venezuelans in Trinidad and blah, 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 and all this nonsense, this is the root cause of why you see so many Venezuelan migrants in Trinidad. But remember this, the sanctions were not a mistake. They were designed to crush Venezuela's economy. It was designed to force regime change. Now, this, you would know, is an American playbook. This is an American playbook. They've done this many times before. You have to look at Haiti. You only have to look at Haiti. The great country that is Haiti is decimated. Started with France, Europe, Toussaint Louverture, if you know that history. And America and the sanctions they've placed on Haiti over the years has destroyed that country economically. They still haven't recovered to this day. So I digress. In 2018, not too long ago, Trinidad's PNM government under Keith Rowley, the man so despised by the UNC currently, you only have to mention his name, and this man seemed to live rent-free in their head. But Keith Rowley signed a deal with the PDVSA. Shell was also involved for the Dragon's gas field in Venezuela. So PDVSA is Venezuelan, and Shell being American, as you know. The plan was to pipe about 150 million cubic feet per day into Trinidad. Venezuela owned the field, of course, but Trinidad had the pipelines and the processing facilities. It was already set up. On paper, it looked like a win-win. It looked like a win-win. And in all actuality, it was. It is a win-win. Like I said, Trinidad had the processing facilities, the pipeline set up nearby, ready to hook up to the Dragon's gas field if the project was to go ahead with Shell. And everyone was going to profit from this. Shell and their shareholders, of course, their multi-millionaire shareholders. Trinidad was going to profit, and Venezuela was also deemed to profit from the Dragon's gas field. But Donald Trump revoked the license. Stuart Young, if you remember, in 2025, announced the cancellation of the Dragon's gas field deal.
Second, is that we have now been informed that our license from OFAC, which is dated the 18th of December 2023, has been revoked by OFAC. And that license is now revoked by OFAC, as well as our coquina mannequin license. It came a little while after the others. What I can tell Trinidad and Tobago is I don't have more details than that. I have been in touch with our attorneys at law in Washington, D.C. There is a process for, I wouldn't say appeal of this revocation, but there is a process for you to make an application for it not to be, or for there to be amendments. And we are going to be engaged in that process on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago. I have also reached out to Mauricio Claver Caron, who is the special envoy, and put in a request for a telephone conversation with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, all of which I expect us to have the opportunity for me once again on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago to present our case. This does not come necessarily as a surprise, seeing how volatile things are, not only with respect to the policy with Venezuela, but what we're seeing.
For those of you who are old enough to remember, you remember him saying that the deal is currently off. So let's go back to 2020. Donald Trump's Treasury in 2020 revoked the OFAC license. Now, without that license, Shell and NGC, which is a Trinidad company, NGC, couldn't legally pay PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan company. The project was dead. Not because of Rowley, not because of Trinidad, but because Washington said so. Washington holds the key. Washington holds the key. They own the refinery. At the end of the day, the refinery is the key here. Now, if we fast forward to 2025, Stuart Young himself had to admit the Dragon's gas deal was officially cancelled after the US, the United States, pulled back the Chevron license. The Chevron license that allowed Shell to explore and operate under the deal. Now, Marco Rubio, now the Secretary of State, reinforced this publicly. He reinforced this publicly. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Marco Rubio is in a minute. So if you think Washington is really ready to do business with Maduro right now, after I've given you a little bit of the history here, if you think Washington is ready to do business with Maduro right now, I want you to listen carefully to what Marco Rubio himself had to say only a few weeks ago about Venezuela and about Maduro. Roll the clip.
No, you're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source. And the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about a year and a half ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
So you've seen what Marco Rubio had to say, categorically. So I want you to get this straight. Let's get this straight together. Let's do this together. Our Prime Minister has recently been seen smiling and shaking hands in Washington, whilst the very man she is meeting calls Maduro a wanted criminal in the United States. How then, I ask you, how then can anyone celebrate a deal with Venezuela? It makes zero sense. This is not going to happen anytime soon. This is why I say I'm no longer going to touch this subject unless I hear valid or reputable information coming from Caracas or the United States. It's impossible. Either Washington wants regime change in Venezuela or it wants to partner with them. They need to make their mind up. It has to be one or the other. It cannot be both. And until that contradiction is resolved, the Dragon's gas deal remains nothing but a fantasy. I've said to you on my previous video what you saw coming from Washington, what you saw between Marco Rubio and the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was nothing but a photo op. For those of you who are probably getting excited about this, like I said to you, is not going to happen. And this is why I find talking about this exhausting. I've seen numerous channels, YouTube channels and social media channels talking about this and oh yes, Stuart Young said this and Kamla said this and blah, blah, blah. This comes down to Venezuela and the United States. One has the natural resources, one has a refinery. This is the reality. The gas belongs to Venezuela, plain and simple. If Venezuela had the adequate refineries, then this would not be a talking point. They don't. Hence why they hire Shell, ExxonMobil, and companies such as BP, etc., to get the natural resources out the ground, however they do it. Trinidad has the infrastructure. The pipeline's already set up. That's how we stand to benefit. But like I said, the refineries and the financial system that make it profitable are controlled by the United States. And Trump has made it clear that Maduro is not welcome in this deal under any circumstance. Trinidad is just the neighbor with the pipelines in this circumstance. Nothing happens without approval from Washington and Caracas. So this is why I want to end this conversation today about what's going on here. I'm telling you now that this deal is not going to happen so long as Maduro is in charge of Venezuela and Donald Trump is in charge of America. What you see happening in the Caribbean Sea, in the Southern Caribbean recently, Trump say it's narco-terrorism, drug boats, etc. We've seen no evidence of that. It's clear to anyone that this isn't about drugs. A speedboat cannot get from Caracas to Washington carrying tons and tons of drugs with 11 people on board. It's just nonsense. They are essentially insulting the intelligence of the people in the Caribbean, Caracas, and even America. So, I digress. Why is this stuck? Why is this stuck? Because it's not about economics anymore. It's about power. It's about power. Donald Trump does not want Maduro profiting from his own natural resources. It sounds insane, but you could say that the American president is, maybe he has some issues himself. He calls him a narco dictator and has made it his mission to destroy the Venezuelan economy. I think he wants to do to Venezuela what America has done to Haiti. I really do. I think it's on that level. On the other side, Maduro sees the Dragon's gas deal as survival. Sanctions placed on them by America have strangled Venezuela. Their gas exports is one of the few lifelines they have left. Literally, one of the few lifelines they have left. And if that gets cut, then you would see a lot more immigrants coming into Trinidad and Tobago. So this deal is not about Trinidad's diplomacy. It's about Trump's ego versus Maduro's survival. It's about Trump's ego versus Maduro's survival. So any nonsense you're hearing in Trinidad about this one said that one, and people are trying to overcomplicate the issue, I believe. When I've seen the odd videos I've seen on social media, whether it be on YouTube or whatnot, about this in Trinidad, they are overcomplicating the issue. This really isn't a UNC PNM thing, despite what you hear politicians saying. And I know politicians do this for brownie points to get one up on the other, but essentially this is about Trump and Maduro, Trump and Venezuela. So let's bust the myth. Let's bust the myth about what's going on here. So this is why I say to you, I don't really intend, I know this video is going on a little bit now, but I don't intend to talk about this until I see facts coming from Venezuela and Washington. Venezuela owns the gas. That's the fact number one. Venezuela owns the gas. I don't need to make that any clearer to you. Number two, an OFAC license means the deal is, I've heard this before, an OFAC license means the deal is alive. I've heard it before. I've heard it from the current government. This is what they're touting. The deal is alive. Without Venezuela's approval, this deal is worthless. You could have all the license in the world. The deal doesn't mean anything without Venezuela's approval. Myth number three I've heard is that the Prime Minister or Kamla Stewart Young, they tend to turn this into domestic politics. This has nothing to do with domestic politics, is what I'm trying to say. This is about Washington versus Caracas. Trinidad, Port of Spain is just a spectator. So let's not overcomplicate the issue anymore. I'm going to end by saying, let's not overcomplicate this issue anymore. This is as simple as Washington versus Caracas, Maduro versus Trump, and we know who tends to win this argument, who tends to win this fight. I'm sorry this video seems to have gone on, but I wanted to make that really, really clear. I wanted to make this really, really clear because I don't really want to talk about this anymore. It's tiresome. I find it frustrating. So I don't want to talk about this anymore unless I see some substantive information coming from Washington and Caracas. So let's call it what it is. Let's call this what it is. The Dragon's gas deal was never in the control of Trinidad and Tobago. It was never in our control. It essentially died in 2020. It died in 2020 and it was buried again. It was buried again in 2025. Washington and Caracas are fighting over power, whilst Trinidad is left clapping for announcements that means nothing. So I'd say until the US and Venezuela resolve their conflict, and I'd finally end by saying this. Thank you, you've stayed to the end of this video. Until the US and Venezuela resolve their conflict, the Dragon's gas deal will remain a dream. The only real question I say is this: who really benefits? Because it sure isn't the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Let's move on. Let us move on for now, at least. Please like, subscribe. Thank you if you've stayed to the end, and I'll see you guys on my next video. For now, much love. God bless. Take care. Peace.